This year, 2022, our theme is taking a deep dive. We are in a new and powerful year of rebuilding, and we will benefit from practicing and fine-tuning our spiritual tools. We are diving into greater unity awareness and teachings facilitated by the great teachers of unity worldwide. What a way to develop our spiritual awareness and expand our experiences and spiritual vocabulary. So sit back and relax as we take another deep dive at unity. I would love to welcome our speaker today, Reverend Ogun Holder, who is speaking on the theme of radical acceptance. Reverend Ogun is the co-founder of Project SANCTUS, a safe, brave online space to discover and be our holiest self. And in so doing, together, create a world of equanimity, justice, and love for all. He is an ordained unity minister, and he holds certifications in spiritual coaching, grief and bereavement counseling, and the Enneagram. His many titles over the years include speaker, teacher, author, podcaster, blogger, musician, parent, and more. And I like the fact that he is referring to himself as a self-proclaimed geek. So without further ado, I welcome Reverend Ogun.
Thank you. Good to be back with you. And I'm wondering if we could turn off the share screen.
We can't hear you, Reverend Ogun.
We can't hear me. No one can hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you now. Thank
you. Hear you.
All right. So some folks are hearing me, some are not. Is that what's happening? Let's get the technical stuff out of the way. And yes, can we turn off the share screen so that there we go. All right. That way you can also see some faces. Yes. So I love that One Republic song, by the way. And I realized as I was listening, a couple of things needed to be updated. The song spoke about 7 billion of us. And I don't know if you've been keeping track, but that song came out in 2018, I think. And 4 years later, we're about to hit 8 billion. We just keep expanding. And 8 billion souls who, for the most part, I think the majority of us really still not experiencing full inner peace, harmony, love, the divine essence that we are. And another update, by the way, in my bio, or rather the description of Project SANCTUS, is that we recently updated it to say that we are creating together a world of love, justice, and liberation for all. And we added the word liberation because what we've realized is that we live in a world where many people do not experience true liberation, and we believe they don't because we don't experience inner liberation. And I use the word liberation a little bit distinctly from freedom, and for me, liberation is truly the removal of anything that inhibits the full expression of my divine self. Okay, freedom is kind of like, I can do whatever I want, but liberation is removing any obstacles that inhibits me from expressing the fullness of my divinity. And one of the reasons I believe that we don't experience through true inner liberation is because of something that the author Tara Brach, who wrote the book Radical Acceptance, speaks of, which is the trance of unworthiness. The trance of unworthiness. And the best way I think we can describe this or connect with this idea is an ongoing feeling of not good enough. Ongoing feeling of not good enough. I don't know if there's anyone else who can relate to that, but I know that that's been quite a journey for me over the years. And one of the interesting things I've realized recently is that one of the ways this lack of liberation inner liberation, inner expressing our divinity has manifested over the centuries is through white supremacy cultural norms. I was very heartened in a sort of bittersweet sort of way when I recently saw the Pope come to offer an official apology to the Canadian people for the atrocities that the Church, the Catholic Church, the atrocities that they inflicted upon the Native peoples through the boarding schools and just the insensitivities of trying to erase culture, erase a beautiful, wholesome culture, erase an expression of divinity, as it were. And white supremacy cultural norms, I believe, is one of those ways that I would say that if there was a sense of inner liberation and peace, there would be no need to harm others. There would be no need to see others as less than. There would be no reason to erase the manifestations of their divinity. So it's just a projection of the not good enoughness. And this is inner work. When Reverend Kelly Isola, who I think most of you know, and I, when we speak about doing anti-racism work as spiritual practice, this is what we're meaning. We're meaning that it's a work to liberate ourselves first and foremost from that trance of unworthiness. Because when we liberate ourselves on the inner, we will have an outer world of liberation. Because as we know, we live from the inside out. The outer world is a reflection of our inner world, both individually and collectively. And it can get messy. Why? Because there's 8 billion of us expressing our inner selves outwardly, and we're all individual, distinct expressions of divinity. So it can get a little bit messy, especially if we are living from that trance of unworthiness. We feel it most when we're disconnected from others, and it makes it difficult for us to trust that we are loved and that we're lovable. For some of us, it feels like when they find out who I really am, when they find out my messy faults, my imperfections, then they won't love me. And how we try to manage that feeling of not good enoughness by holding back and playing small and playing safe so that we don't risk failure. We withdraw from fully being present in the moment. We keep ourselves busy. The grind culture is a big thing, constantly working and achieving, and we think we're clever. Sometimes we put a spiritual twist on this because we always are stuck in like back-to-back spiritual improvement projects and self-improvement projects, right? So that's also a manifestation of our busyness. We become overly self-critical, feeling the need to control ourselves and our bodies and other people's bodies. We're seeing a lot of that in the news here in the US recently. Then we tend to do a lot of blame shifting, blaming others for our dissatisfaction as well. But why are we in this trance in the first place, this trance of unworthiness? The Buddha speaks to this. He says that all suffering and distraction arise from a mistaken understanding that we are separate and distinct selves. Let me say that again. All suffering or dissatisfaction arises from a mistaken understanding that we are a separate and distinct self. What do I mean by self? Or self is like our psychological mental understanding of ourselves, or thoughts, emotions, beliefs, patterns of behaviors. And this is not necessarily a bad thing, right? This is how we exist in the world, in this physical world. But when we make that the core of our identity, we lose sight of our divinity. We lose sight of the fullness of ourselves. We lose sight of our wholeness, because we can always look at our thoughts, emotions, and beliefs and say, they're not good enough. We need to improve them. We need to change them. So how do we awaken from this trance of unworthiness? Through radical acceptance. The word radical comes from the Latin radix, which means going to the root. go into the origin. So when we fully accept absolutely everything about ourselves and our lives, then we can begin to get to the root of our discontents or lack of inner liberation. And to be clear, this is an inner process. This is an inner process of accepting ourselves in any given moment. Okay, it's about noticing when we are feeling pain, or whether it's emotional or physical, and allowing those feelings to lead us to a deeper place of healing. And we're going to jump into, over the course of this Sunday and the next 2 Sundays, the whole process of what that looks like, feels like, how to experience that. But I think it's important for me to, before we jump into that, make sure you're clear about what radical acceptance is not. Because some people hear the word acceptance and certain thoughts come to mind. So radical acceptance is not resignation. It's not saying, well, it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it, especially myself or the world around me. Carl Rogers, the psychologist, says that the curious paradox is, when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. Sometimes we get stuck in this is who I am, there's nothing I can do about it. Resignation. That's not what we're talking about here, acceptance. We're not talking about defining ourselves by our limitations. Many of us have stories and narratives about why we can't do things, and then we get stuck in that. That's not acceptance. There's a difference between acknowledging where there's room for improvement and defining ourselves by it. Acceptance, radical acceptance, is also not self-indulgence. It's not about just acting on cravings and having no sort of self-control. It's more about noticing the cravings and the desires, and asking ourselves, well, where are those coming from? And doing some deep self-inquiry and investigation. Radical acceptance is not passiveness. A lot of times we interpret acceptance, again, as that it is what it is, and therefore there's nothing we can do about it. And we do not engage. We do not engage with ourselves, with each other, with the world around us. The truth is, radical acceptance leads to actions that come from a more conscious and centered place. And the last thing radical acceptance is not, which is related to all the things I said before, is what we call spiritual bypassing. And that's where we use our spiritual teachings to avoid any inner and outer challenges. I like to call it paralysis by spiritual analysis, right? We get stuck in the saying things like, in order to have a peaceful world, we need to be peaceful, right? And therefore, we will not engage. We will not step into or lean into discomfort and conflict. If it doesn't feel good, we're not doing it. If it doesn't feel good, it must not be spiritual, because spiritual things are supposed to feel good. A saying that I used to hear a lot in Unity is, ours is not to set it right, but to see it right. And therefore we didn't engage. Another one is that it's all in divine order. So therefore, this is the way it's supposed to be. So there's nothing for us to do, which is not an accurate understanding of divine order, by the way. So radical acceptance is not spiritual bypassing. I did want to share with you, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into spiritual bypass, and I wrote an article for Unity magazine. I just put the link in there some months ago, so you can check it out later on your own time. And interestingly enough, to brag on myself a little bit, that article was actually just named as a finalist for this Folio. Folio is an organization that recognizes excellence in literature and publishing. And Unity Magazine has won awards in the past for its design, and this article was actually just named as a finalist in one of their content categories. So I'm particularly happy and proud of myself for that, and I think it speaks to the idea that more and more people are beginning to realize that in order to really create this world and have the experience we say we want to have, it has to start as an internal process. It has to start with our own inner healing, our own inner peace. And one of the ways to get to that, to experience that, is through radical acceptance. When we engage in moment-to-moment exercises or experiences or practice of radical acceptance, we pull ourselves out of that trance of unworthiness. And it's a powerful exercise because it allows us to realize when we get stuck in repetitive behaviors of like I mentioned before, of overwork or self-criticism, and it allows us to stay connected to ourselves and each other. And the very first step in radical acceptance is the sacred pause. The sacred pause. It's an invitation to just stop. Whenever we feel discomfort, we feel out of sorts, we feel anything less than the contentment that comes from recognizing our wholeness, the first step is simply to pause. Why? Because pausing disrupts our habitual pattern of behavior that happens when we feel pain. When we feel pain, what's the first thing we want to do? We want to stop the pain. We want to get rid of the pain. We are pain averse people. We don't like to be uncomfortable. So we try to numb the pain. We do that in a lot of ways. Some of us engage in a lot of mental planning to try and control the situation. We worry, we snack, we shop, we spend way too much time on TikTok and Instagram, just mindlessly scrolling. These are ways we try to numb ourselves from the pain. When we pause, it takes us out of those habitual patterns. It takes us out of the what do I have to do next. The pause gives us the opportunity to stop running from our shadow, because when we feel pain and discomfort internally, it's usually our shadow self that's being activated, and the pause stops us from running and allows us to see the desires and the fears that are driving us. And why it's important to not run from the shadow, from the pain, is because when we do this, we're rejecting parts of ourselves. And when we are rejecting parts of ourselves at any point in time, we are confirming our unworthiness. We are rejecting our wholeness. So part of radical acceptance is to, and to be clear, this isn't saying, like I said, this isn't saying that there isn't room for transformation, for growth, but to reject any part of ourselves that we don't like is, again, to confirm this narrative of unworthiness. And when I say pause, it can look like a few seconds, a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, a few months, a few years. There's no defined amount of time. It's all about however long it takes to lean into the acceptance as opposed to the run-in, and however long it takes to become wholeheartedly present to whatever it is that we're feeling. And it's also really an embodied experience. And when I say embodied experience, our bodies are where we carry our trauma. We think the trauma is more about remembering horrible situations, and the pain of those situations is stored in our body. So our body is really the ground, the starting point of radical acceptance. So when we take that sacred pause, we now have the opportunity to become directly aware of what's happening in our body instead of getting lost in our thoughts. So we pause and we scan and notice what we feel in our body, especially in our throat, our chest, or stomach. We ask what is happening, what wants my attention, what's asking for acceptance. Because our body tells us what we're feeling so much quicker than our mind does, right? When we're angry, what do we feel? We tighten up. Sometimes we ball our fists up and don't even realize that our fists are balled up. Sometimes when you're afraid, I know I feel knots in my stomach and a constriction in my chest. When I feel shame, my face burns and my shoulders slump. Like I literally want to hide, even though I'm just standing in plain sight. I try to shrink myself. And these reactions happen even before my mind is aware of what's happening. In fact, let's do it now. Let's just take a moment and pause and check in with the body. What is your body feeling right now? What is your body feeling as I speak of unworthiness, as I speak of shame, as I speak of wholeness, as I speak of liberation? How do these words activate your body? Do you feel a tightening or a loosening? Where do you feel it? Because when we can take the time to practice and recognize what our body feels, then we can attend to that with genuine care and compassion, and listen with unconditional love to ourselves. This is the journey that the Buddha took before he became enlightened. When he was Prince Siddhartha, he lived extremes of access and asceticism. He lived both extremes, and he realized neither was the way. So after just years of trying everything, he paused and he sat under the tree and just paused. He faced his shadow. In the legends, the shadow was manifested as the god Mara, which is Sanskrit word for delusion. He faced the delusions of himself, and he saw beyond them, and he paid mindful attention to himself instead of reacting, instead of just trying to find a way to fix. He just paused, and it is in this pause that he realized his true nature, and he was awakened, and that's when he became the Buddha, the word that means the awakened one. So what is our path to become awakened? What is our path to become our own Buddha? It's through radical acceptance, which begins again with that sacred pause. So when the discomfort, the pain, the Mara, the delusions visit us in the form of troubling emotions, fear-based worries, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of not good enoughness, let us pause and say, I see you, and begin to accept with compassion right where we are and how we feel. Radical acceptance, there's two aspects to it: mindfulness and compassion. The mindfulness is that moment-to-moment awareness of what's happening to us, and the compassion is the capacity to relate to ourselves and what's happening within us with tenderness, with sympathy, with love. So the only way we can get to that mindfulness and that compassion with ourselves and with anyone else is first to pause. I know some of you have done some work with Reverend Kelly and I in Project SANCTUS, and we stress this a lot. Just pause. The Buddhists talk about inviting Mara to have tea with you. Just pause. Befriend the shadow. Say yes to the experience, not the outer experience, the inner experience of what's happening to you. This is an integral piece as we seek and desire to have a world where racism and white supremacy, culture, thinking, and thoughts no longer exist. One of the things we have to do is accept that a lot of those norms and traits we have internalized, because for many of us, that's the only culture we've ever known. So can we pause and begin to do the inner work to realize that, then to decolonize ourselves of it, to shift those internalized norms? And that begins with accepting that they're there rather than just outright denying. So this is what I'd like to invite you into this week before we meet again next Sunday. Is to consciously pause whenever there's a feeling of discontent, of hopelessness, of sadness, of anger, of despair, of shame. Whenever there's a feeling that is anything other than the pure joy of expressing our wholeness, just pause. Take a moment and check in. Where do you feel it in your body? What are you feeling in your body? And for this week, simply give your attention to those places with tenderness, with compassion. Don't judge. Don't attempt to fix. Don't even attempt to stop the feeling. Just simply notice it and attend to it with compassion. Let's do that now with a little meditation. So I want to invite you to, if you're not yet in a comfortable seated position or standing or lying, wherever you are, simply to do that right now. And if you're comfortable, only if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes or you can leave the eyes open, but allow yourselves to check in with the breath and find a comfortable pace of breathing. And simply breathe. And in this moment, we pause. We pause for the breath. We pause to become present to this moment. So if you find yourself having thoughts of things that happened before, or things that have yet to be, if you find yourself being distracted by what's next on the calendar, how you're going to spend your day today, or some distressing news that you heard, just for a moment, bring your focus to the breath. And as you breathe, again, just gently scan the body and notice. Notice where there are places of tension, of discomfort. Scan at your own pace. And for a few moments in the silence, If you notice any places of tension, discomfort, attend to them with love and compassion. And that may feel like just simply focusing your attention, your energy, and just breathing. Imagining waves of love emanating from your heart or from your crown to those places. And let's just do that for a few moments in the silence. And we end with a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the innate divinity that we are, for the wholeness and the fullness of love that we are beyond that which we do not accept about ourselves. Grateful for today being the beginning of a journey towards acceptance, towards inner peace, towards inner healing, so then we may bring peace and healing to the world. And so it is. Thank you.